Hello and welcome to the Geeks Review. I'm Royce.
And I'm Joshua.
On today's show, we're going to be talking about The Bad Batch, an animated Star Wars series streaming on Disney+. This is a sequel spin-off to The Clone Wars itself, an animated series that chronicled the events of the 3-year conflict between Star Wars movies Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. The Bad Batch are a squad of genetically modified clone soldiers with desirable mutations, like advanced combat skills, marksmanship, and more. At the end of the war, with the downfall of a republic, the rise of the Empire, and the death of the Jedi at the hands of Darth Vader, the Bad Batch find themselves at odds with the new regime, and set off across a galaxy with their young female clone companion in their care. The series also kind of acts as a prequel to The Mandalorian and the other animated series Rebels. And Josh,
Yes.
what are your thoughts?
This is definitely Filoni returning to form.
Yep,
Dave Filoni coming back, doing what he does best, 3D animated Star Wars shows, and gotta hand it to D.D. Baker. He's carrying the whole show on his back, being 90% of the voices that we're hearing.
There's a veteran voice actor, D. Bradley Baker, who is mostly known for creature work, and he plays all the clone troopers.
Yes.
And even though these are clone troopers, they're all, look the same, they all sound the same, he all gives them their own unique personalities, their own unique spin.
Yes.
And I mean, with these characters, these Bad Batch characters are all really distinct characters, and compared to Commander Cody, Captain Rex, Captain Bly.
Where the only thing you can tell them apart is either if they've got a scar or their hair's different.
or tattoos, or
Yeah.
sometimes they paint their armor differently, so it makes it a bit easier.
Well, with these ones, they physically are more distinct than the other clones due to the genetic mutation. Crosshair's a bit more skinnier, Tech's a bit more short and stout. Well, Wrecker is massive, and unfortunately, poor Hunter looks like John Rambo.
He does. He's kind of got the flowing hair, and he's even got the red bandana, and he's got this skull tattoo on half his face.
Yes,
and
which is pretty much the symbol of the Bad Batch.
Yeah.
Or Clone Force 99.
Yes, that's the official term they've got there. Crosshair's very sort of like Clint Eastwood, like with his snarl, hey?
Snarl, sort of nearly not squinting so much, but always fiddling with something in his mouth, either a toothpick.
And I guess you could look at Wrecker and sort of say he's like the Rock.
Yeah.
Just for sheer size and scale.
Maybe not intelligence-wise. He's more like a child than anything.
Yeah. These characters were first introduced in the Clone Wars.
Yes. Season 7, the first 4 episodes of the final season. So,
actually, they were introduced, I guess, many years ago, because the Clone Wars ran from 2008 to 2014, where it was unceremoniously cancelled when Disney took over.
Then they were in the unaired episodes.
Yeah, they were unfinished, unrendered. There's a few GIFs and images out there of them still, all pre-rendered and sort of strange looking. But they obviously struck a chord with people, and they're back. And I got to be honest, I wasn't much of a fan of them the first time around, but the first episode...
I enjoyed them.
Oh, regardless. Yeah, you did back then, yeah. I remember that when we reviewed that last year.
Yeah.
But going into this show, not being too sold on the idea, I was sold by about the halfway point of even the first 10 minutes of that episode had me okay, I'm kind of interested to see where these guys go now, because it puts them into an interesting position.
It's a new era, it's a new time, the Empire is on the rise, and these are, would be pretty in the very small batch, if you will, of clones who don't like the idea of the Galactic Republic.
Oh, the Galactic Empire, we should say.
Yeah, the Galactic Empire, because like they said, the regs are programmed. These guys don't quite fall into that programming.
This is quite dense lore-wise, going in, even episode 1. I mean, you need to be a real Star Wars fan. You need to have seen the Clone Wars, and...
It does make you want to do your homework.
Yeah. You can't just step into this like you could with The Mandalorian, which sort of left a little bit of leeway.
It gave you an excellent entry point in if you're a newcomer, where you could easily fill in the blanks and then go and watch the films, and there, you're caught up.
Pretty much,
but then with appearances of characters like Bo-Katan or even Ahsoka Tano, where you do need to have seen Clone Wars to go, oh, that's where they're from, or even Rebels.
I think as well with The Mandalorian, it introduced those characters in a naturalistic way, because for that lead character, it was the first time he met them as well.
Pretty much.
So a new audience could watch and go like, oh, I've never heard of Ahsoka Tano before, but I know who she is now. Oh, bonus, I can now go watch Clone Wars and Rebels and find out more about her.
Here you do need to have seen at least the final season.
Well, God, I mean, okay, you've gone and got, with the Clone Troopers, you've gone and got something called the Inhibitor Chip.
Yes.
So, for context, I mean, the Clone Troopers in the movies were all played by New Zealand actor Tamara Morrison. You might remember him from the movie Once Were Warriors and the soap opera Shortland Street. He played a bounty hunter, a Mandalorian bounty hunter called Jango Fett in Attack of the Clones about 19 years ago.
Yes.
And Jango Fett, within the story, was the template for this clone trooper army who were like the precursors to the stormtroopers, you know, from the original Star Wars movies. So all the clones would serve on the side of the good guys, we say with air quotes, really. The Republic, they served alongside the Jedi Knights. They formed their own opinions, their own personalities. They had friendships with the Jedi, and then
developed themselves, and then inevitably turned on their former commanders and generals.
Yeah, and the movie presents it very much like they are sort of unwavering to the Republic and the Empire by extension. That the Chancellor Palpatine, the Dark Lord Sidious, the Emperor.
Well, the first episode at least. I mean, it is a long episode, but yeah.
Yeah. He gives the order of Order 66, and they all turn unquestioningly upon their once former friends and comrades. Whereas the cartoon of the Clone Wars, animated series of the Clone Wars, tries to give an explanation as to why they did that, because that show really fleshed out these characters.
It did. It gave them more life. Really
made the friendships real. Like, I mean, with characters like Captain Rex especially.
And Cody and all that. It adds a soul-crushingness to it when Order 66 is finally brought down.
So the inhibitor chip was basically an implant in their minds that made them...
an organic little snip that was planted in there at a very early stage of their growth process.
Yeah, and it made them basically just follow this without question.
Yeah, it was to modify their behavior, but it was also there to sort of program them, to actually condition them.
And that's kind of the reason as to why all these clone troopers do then turn, you know.
Yeah.
And it seems as though in the first few moments of this episode of The Bad Batch, the titular heroes don't have that. And with the exception of maybe Crosshair, who seems to be the guy who sort of unquestioningly just follows orders anyway.
Well, or
trusts in the system.
Said in the show that they do have their inhibitor chips, but because of their genetic mutations, that it's been affected, so it won't actually act the same way as the regs would.
Right. Okay. Well, that adds another dimension to it, then, I guess.
Yeah.
Because you did have a few characters like Captain Rex at the end of Series 7, who fought against it, who was kind of able to snap out of it.
Well, he resisted it briefly until the actual inhibitor chip was removed from his brain.
Yeah. And then he could, sort of continue to live with free will.
Yes. Well, these guys, it's stuck in them, but whether or not it's effective, as it showed in the episode, Wrecker, Tech, and even Hunt, well, they all heard it, but the only one who really was affected by it was Crosshair.
Yeah, which is what made me think that maybe he was just loyal to the cause and they didn't have him for whatever reason. No. Because they were so different.
They had them, and it was explained later on.
Right, okay. There's a lot in that episode.
There is a lot in that episode. It is a 75-minute episode.
Yeah.
And then they cut that in half by the next next episode.
Yeah, I think that's going to be like the 30-minute runtime is going to be the standard moving forward. And it's a nice chunk, for an animated show.
It gets a lot done, and this is beautiful animation. This is probably Star Wars at its finest.
Yeah,
when it comes to animation.
The face animations were like, wow, this is like Disney quality. And then I remembered this is Disney.
Yeah. They've really made a huge technological jump from the first 5 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Clone Wars movie, which came out back in 2008, and it was very... I mean, the character designs are sort of woodcut inspired. Like, they're very sort of
they're very
stylish.
Sharp looking.
Yeah. And then they're there, and you actually see, like, there's like little moments within their eyes. Like, you can read emotions just through subtle movements in their eyes now and little like curls of the lip that they can do now. It's like really...
It's evolved fantastically, and the lighting even showing in some of their eyes.
Oh, yeah.
It's just,
And, I mean, we start off with, I guess, Order 66 taking place. We've got returning characters. Well, characters we've never really seen before.
We have seen Master Dipper Bollara before, but she was just a background character in The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. While her Padawan, Caleb Doom, we have seen before, just in a different show.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and the return of the voice actor.
Yes, which was probably one of the more distracting parts of the episode. I love Freddie Prinze, but a 44-year-old doing the voice of what is clearly a teenager who's...
He developed earlier.
Yeah, developed...
His voice broke very early on.
Yeah, it's a little bit too distracting for me, but that's just one of the two minor gripes that I have of the episode, and that's really it.
A lot of fans were saying like there was a comic that came out quite a few years ago.
Yes, there was a Kanan comic.
Yeah, Kanan was basically... He was one of the leads in Rebels, which was sort of the sequel series. It was set closer to the original movies, and he was...
It was the Clone Wars to the original trilogy.
Yeah, it was basically fleshing out all those details that happened before the original movies. I mean, you get...
It was just focusing on one rebel cell, but it focused on the Alliance as a whole.
And with cameos like Mon Mothma and Princess Leia.
Saul Guerrera, played by Forrest Whitaker again.
Yeah, Lando Calrissian, played by Billy Dee Williams.
Governor Tarkin, being reprised by the voice actor who did the Beyond the Grave animation for Rogue One.
Yeah, and you got Tarkin in Bad Batch as well.
Yes.
Massively overhauled from how he looked in Clone Wars.
Yes, a lot older than what he was when he first appeared in the Citadel episode.
Yep.
But
in only a few years, unfortunately.
Stress and war will do that to you, Royce.
Oh, yeah. I guess also the Peter Cushing genetics.
Yeah. But he looks phenomenal. They all do.
Yeah, they're so... Like, there's a few characters who do feel a lot more well-rounded and a lot more sort of natural, composed, like, opposed to, like, a character like the Kaminoan Lama Su, who's very...
long
woodcut styling as well. Yeah, he's very sharp-featured compared to the others. They're very sort of soft and very natural.
Mind you, Peter Cushing did have a very angular face.
He did, and I think they captured that a lot better than they have before here. What else was there?
Well, there was... It showed us the transitioning from the Republic into the Empire, how they sent Tarkin to Kamino to evaluate whether or not the clones were to be kept.
And you do see that physical transition. I mean, all the clone troopers are sort of stripped of their colours and they're just brought down to their generic white
with the exception
uniforms.
of a certain few garrison groups, like the 104th, who had a good chunk of their forces left behind to guard Kamino, and the Coruscant Guard.
They were red ones, weren't they? They were like nice little red accents on their armour.
Yes,
but
shock troopers.
It's a real... You feel that dread building. I mean, this is really a show for the fans, and you sort of understand what's happening, but you're seeing a side of this story you've never really seen before.
No, and it's definitely continuing on with the theme of Season 7, where it's maturing, the war's ending, and it's getting a lot more hard-hitting. Especially with something like Episode 2, where we were reintroduced to the clone deserter Cut and his family on Silicon.
That was a cameo I was not expecting to ever see come back, if I'm honest. That was like, back in 2010, I think.
Yeah, it was very much back in the early seasons.
Yeah, it was like the middle of Series 2 back in 2010, where you go and meet this clone trooper deserter who ran away from war, and he went and met this lady and married her and adopted her kids as his own. And it was sort of, one of those dangling plot threads that was left hanging for well over a decade. And here the characters are all back, a few years older now, but pretty much the same. And it was just crazy to see that.
And in the same episode, explaining and introducing for the first time after us hearing about it in things like Mandalorian and even some of the old movies, chain codes.
Yes.
Finally coming in with what are they? Well, they're a galactic ID that will allow you to spend Imperial credits.
That's very fascistic, isn't it? Hey?
Yeah,
it's very
very excellent way of creating a secret database on people.
Yeah, it's
The very Big Brother is watching, but we're gonna advertise it as not.
Yeah, it's you got the new character of Omega.
Yes, the first female clone. It's unknown of whose genes she's of or who her donor was.
I'm willing to bet, based upon the New Zealand accent.
Yeah, she's a fat clone.
Yeah, that she is just like, I mean, they can tweak the genes, and she's just, the female version.
She's the last defective clone, so we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, and...
I mean, it's simple enough to switch a few chromosomes around.
Yeah, well, I mean, they can do that. I mean, they can spit out 1 million clone troopers. They can, turn a male into a woman. So, I mean, one thing that really stood out for me was she feels like so grown up in the first episode, and then going into episode 2, it's like, wow, no, she is a kid.
Yeah, and she's a teenager who really hasn't left Camino.
And they have to realize, like, they have to grapple with that, the Bad Batch, like Hunter especially, like thinking, can we look after her? This is probably too much responsibility we've taken on.
Soldiers. We don't know anything about children other than, get down, Mr. President.
There was a scene where she wanders outside the perimeter of the farm, and, a giant, feral cat comes along.
The
Nexu, which is a returning creature. It was cool to see.
It was first seen when they were landing on Silikamai, and the moment I saw it, I went, it's Chekhov's Nexu.
It is, and they go and rescue her, and Hunter, who's the leader of the Bad Batch, we should say, is pretty much like, what were you doing outside your thing? And then Cut, who's the father, the deserter clone trooper, is like, she's a kid, like, are you okay? And he's a lot more tender and human with her, which I really liked, because that's something which I think is kind of lacking at times with... Something that stuck out to me with The Mandalorian was the episode with the return of Grief Karga and Cara Dune and the Mithril, the blue-skinned alien.
Yes.
And they tag him, they bring him along on their mission, and he's not a soldier. He's not like an expert, and he's sort of...
He's just some crim that's working off his sentence.
And he's really out of his depth, but they keep, like, slamming him for being, like, nervous, and it's like, toughen up, and he's like, guys, I'm not a soldier.
No.
He holds his own, but they sort of... It bothered me how they were always, like, criticising his character, and that's something you always see. And Hunter goes to do that with this obviously inexperienced child, and then Cut goes, well, no, she's a kid. You need to talk to her like she's a kid, Yes. She's not that old. So it kind of leaves the question as to where we go now.
Well, that's interesting to find. By the time of this airing, the next episode will be out the following day.
Yeah, tomorrow. Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Which will be cool to see.
It will be very interesting to see where they go from that, because this series is promised to be 14 episodes long, and they've really shown a lot in the trailers on what they're promising, with characters returning like Fennec Shan from The Mandalorian.
Yeah, played by Ming-Na Wen, and presumably voicing her here as well, which is going to be interesting.
People like returning characters like Captain Rex, and others. It's really quite a lot to see where we're going forward with this, because whether or not we'll get a season or not is something to be desired. I do hope we get maybe a little bit more than just one season. Yeah,
I reckon so.
But we'll just have to see. At this moment, we're 3 episodes in as of tomorrow, and with 11 more on the way.
Yeah, there's a few other characters floating around, the margins, like, Ahsoka Tano, Darth Maul, potentially.
We'll just have to see whether or not they can get Sam Whitaker back.
Yeah, well, I think they could,
Oh, yeah. He
loves any chance to play that character.
I mean, they had Forrest Whitaker come in to reprise Saul Guerrero in the first episode.
Yeah, was it Forrest Whitaker?
I think it was. It felt like him. I mean...
He was an interesting character because he first appeared in the Clone Wars, 8 or so years ago, and then they go and cast Forrest Whitaker, big name actor, as him on the big screen.
And then he comes back and plays him again in the Rebels TV series.
How far, this is going to be a spoiler just by saying it, how far through Jedi Fallen Order are you?
He's back in that too, isn't he?
He is, yeah. And he's becoming one of those characters who's always popping up somewhere, but it's really cool to see him and really cool to see
that
it's actually the actor.
It's a fleshed out universe.
Yeah, it is a bit of a tricky line to walk because, I mean, one problem Star Wars has is it does feel a bit small at times when everyone kind of knows everyone.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Rey Palpatine and sort of Jana being the surprise daughter of Lando Calrissian is kind of like, really? More so for the last one.
Yeah.
You know, with that connection. But, I mean, the Bad Batch themselves have hung out with Captain Rex and, by extension, Anakin Skywalker, who's, of course, Darth Vader. Spoiler. Yeah. But, yeah, if they're going to be meeting up with, Captain Rex and Ahsoka's just off screen and, Darth Maul's there, it's a very close-knit sort of thing.
It is, and it's shown that Rex is going to be in the series. It's unknown when.
And Fennec Shand, if she's, obviously got ties to the Mandalorian.
I think she may be a recurring character.
I did hear when this series was initially announced that it was going to be them, like, acting as mercenaries. Which
I think that's what Episode 3 may be building.
Yeah, because it is very early days still.
Yeah, because from what we've got at the moment, they're deserted. At least 4 of them have deserted. Crosshair, well, not Crosshair. Wrecker, Echo, Tech, and Hunter have abandoned the Galactic Empire, spiriting Omega away off Kamino. While Crosshair is sort of left to become the first of the Imperial clones.
Yeah.
And what looks to be like the start of the Dark Trooper initiative. Or Death Trooper project, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, if you go and look at action figures.
Yeah.
There is a black suited clone trooper with a green visor that's, we might be seeing in the series in the next few weeks. Maybe, serving under Crosshair, which could be...
We'll just have to see.
Yes. Anyway, final thoughts on The Bad Batch.
This is a show where, I hate to say it, you are going to need to do your homework if you want to watch it, and you feel better for doing that.
Yeah, because, I mean, the Clone Wars, a lot of people say it's a bit of a hard watch to get into, and, I mean, admittedly, the style and, the animation has aged a little in those earlier series.
Yes.
And there is, the fact with it playing out of sequence.
Yeah.
Where something like episode 10 of series 1 takes place before the movie, which came out before the show, like 6 months before the show, and it's like, it's a mess.
Yeah, there are lists out there to tell you how to watch it chronologically, but you're season jumping a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, you can still watch it in the order it was released in, like in the order it's on Disney Plus, and it still makes sense.
Yes.
To a degree.
To a degree.
If you just remember that bits are out of order and like the guy you saw get arrested and killed in one episode is alive again
in
10 episodes later.
Yeah, it's probably better if you had them already pre-acquired through the internet and you just line them up and watch them that way rather than having to use Disney Plus and, well...
That's interesting, actually, because I think the very first chronological episode is the one that introduces the character of Echo before he becomes Echo.
Yeah.
Really.
Domino Squad.
Yeah, and he's part of the Bad Batch. And, wow, I remember that was actually the very first episode I saw back in the day was the first one that introduced Echo and all the others, like Cut Up and, you know, Cody and Rex. Yeah.
And Fives.
Fives, that's the one, yeah. Yeah, wow. It's really dense.
It is.
Also, vocal cameos to a degree from Ian McDiarmid as the Emperor, even if it is just,
reusing the speech from episode 3.
The First Galactic Empire. Yeah. It's a smorgasbord of stuff for Star Wars fans, and if you are a Star Wars fan and you know your Star Wars stuff, it's definitely one to check out.
It is, absolutely.
Plus, being on Disney Plus, everything else is on there now, like Mandalorian and Falcon and Winter Soldier and WandaVision.
It's taking over. The mouse is taking over.
Yeah. I mean, get in and with your free week and binge it all. Anyway, that's it for today's show. We talked about The Bad Batch. We'll be back next week. Not sure what with, but we'll see you then.
Back.
I'm Royce.
And I'm Joshua.
See you next time. Bye for now.